Welcome to Strategic Change Management class. This is Learning with Dr. Linda Kimensu. You are most welcome to our class today. This is a unit that can be taught to every postgraduate student doing MBA. If you'd wish to learn about how to manage change in the workplaces, this is the right place for you to be. So, for this class, we're going to be learning about concepts and triggers of change, nature of organizational change, and the perspectives to organizational change. Now, what comes to your mind when you think about change? Does change excite you, or does change elicit feelings of fear in you? Now, change is constant. Whether you like it or not, we are always faced with change. Currently, we've been faced with a big change because of the pandemic. We've had to work from home. It has changed how we live. It has changed how we work and how we interact with people. So someone might ask, what is the meaning of change? According to dictionary.com, to change is to make the form, nature, content, and feature course of something different from what it could be if left alone. So anything that makes it different, different ways of studying, different ways of working, different ways of living, we could say we are constantly under some form of change. It means to transform, convert, transfer, adjust, shift, or revolutionize. I would want to share with you some images so that you can think about change and imagine what change means to these different categories of people. On my far right, you can see the image of a white person changing or coloring people to be red in color. I would want you to review this kind of a change and think about it. Is this kind of change transformational, or would you consider it transactional? Is it a change in terms of core beliefs? Is it a cultural change, or is it just a superficial change? Now, when you go down here, you can see there's a gentleman here moving from one group of people to the next. This group of people here are white, and these other people here are white. And this little person here is blue. What does that tell you about change management? Anytime we have change agents, do they actually change the organizations? Say, for example, when you hire someone to come and do a change in your organizations in terms of culture, would you say that this person, most of the time, that they are able to change the group of people to be what they intend them to be? That is something that you need to just think about, especially as regards to the role of change agent. Now, when you come here, you can see some people in a boardroom. And if you look closely, they have two different charts. We have the chart for the profits and the chart for the sales. Well, if you look closely again, it seems the profits and the sales of this particular company is going down. And these people seem to really be disoriented and feeling like, what do we need to do so that they can bring about the changes in their profits and their sales? And there's a statement down here that we can most of the time relate to. What if we don't change at all and something magical just happens? What does that tell you about change? That change is sometimes difficult, that sometimes people do not want to change, that sometimes in as much as the efforts from the change may be good, that the profits and the sales may go up, the process of change might not be as easy. And this is illustrated by this butterfly. When a butterfly is going through the different stages of growth, it moves from an egg, a pupa, a larva, a caterpillar, to a full-blown butterfly. Now, for the people who have done biology, you understand that every of these stages of a butterfly, they come with a challenge. And not every egg turns to a pupa. And not every pupa becomes a larva. And the change process is painful, and sometimes some of the butterflies actually die along the way. But as you can see with the butterfly, it is so beautiful. It looks beautiful. And this is when you talk about change management and vision. Whenever you share the vision of your change efforts with the people who are supposed to initiate the change, then they are likely to skip the pace. When people are able to see what is the likely outcome of their change effort, where they're going to see themselves being as beautiful as this butterfly, then maybe they can be able to join you in terms of bringing about the change. But the process definitely is not easy. The process is not easy. As you can see with this gentleman, this person is changing people, coloring them color red, yet himself, he's not changed. Have we seen that in our organizations where you have change agents or even top management don't seem to have bought into the idea of change that they are actually implementing, that they are actually forcing people to adopt? This is the kind of change. Definitely, we may look like we have changed on the outside, but the form has not changed. So the purpose of this class is to be able to understand change management and how do we move from transactional changes. How do we do incremental changes like that of a butterfly so that the change is actually fundamental, so that the change is actually at the core, so that you can actually change the culture of the people. Now, these are some of the quotes that are very, they really speak to me whenever we think about change management. People support improvements. It's the change that they don't like. You could agree. People love incremental changes. But whenever you bring about radical change, sometimes it can be difficult to be accepted. Things that got us here, that which got us where we are, is unlikely to get us where we want to go. And I think this goes alongside the phrase that you can't do the same thing the same way over and over again and expect different results. Change is the only constant. And I'm sure this season of COVID-19 has really shown us that change is the only constant. Now, when we think about now organizational change, so many theorists have actually argued that there is no definite definition of organizational change. Why? Because different organizations approach change differently. If you look at a parastatal and you review, say, a private entity or a small business venture, and faced with the same situation, like what has just happened with 2020 COVID-19, every organization is going to have a very different approach in how they manage change. And so there has not been really one defined or one agreed upon definition as to what is organizational change. But for the purpose of this class, we would go with this definition that organizational change is that alteration of the environment, structure, culture, technology, we could add processes and people. And sometimes this is initiated by a change agent. And this change agent could sometimes be an internal change agent or could be an external change agent. It is important to ask yourself, in what instances will I need an internal change agent? Maybe if I am working within a restricted budget, could be I would have to go with internal change agent. The line managers, maybe I'm working with doing something that is very sensitive to the organization, and I would not wish that people get to have that information. I might have to do with an internal change agent. However, if there are things to do with information technology, maybe we are bringing about a new system that most of organizations, our members do not have knowledge of, an external change agent may be more appropriate. Now, this external or internal change agent can either be proactive or reactive. So what if you're a change agent, say you have been hired or you've been given a job to be a change agent, what do you need to do? These are the 3 questions that every change agent needs to bear in mind. The first question, what are the forces acting upon me? And when we talk about what are the forces acting upon me, we're actually talking about the internal and external triggers of change. You have to understand, where is the change coming from? Is it coming because of an external trigger, maybe globalization, maybe trade liberalization? Is it coming because of technology? Is it coming because of a change in the external environment? Or is it coming because of a change in the internal environment? Are you having product modification? Are you having a change in the processes? You have a change in the top management? What is the force acting upon you? It's very important that you understand the force that is acting upon you. Once you've understood the forces acting upon you, it's very important to ask yourself then, what should I change? Should the change be at departmental level? Should the change be at the program level? Should it be company-wide? Should it be strategic? Should it be process kind of change? Should it be people-oriented kind of change? Should it be a change that captures the technology and structure of the organization? It is very important that you identify what is it that you need to change and work into being incremental, working one step at a time. And then finally, how should we change it? How should we change it? And this is where now we look at the models of change. What kind of model will you use in terms of change management? Are you going to use Kurt-Lewin 3-stage model? Are you going to use McKinsey 7S model? Are you going to use push and pull kind of change model? What will advise the kind of change model that you're going to use? So those are some of the very important questions that I would want you to bear in mind when you're thinking about the role of a change agent. What role are you going to be taking up as a change agent within an organization? Now, there's one thing that we've just agreed, that so many people argue that organizational change is very broad. And what happens is that some people have said that we can only look at the perspectives of organizational change. And this takes me to the next slide. But before we go to these perspectives, we can review the triggers and the drivers of change. We have those triggers and drivers of change that come from external, and there are those that come from the internal forces. The external forces, we could look at them from PESTEL, political, economic, social, cultural, technological, ecological, and legal. From these 5 components of the PESTEL, we could look at change from, is change coming because of maybe a law from the legal environment? Maybe a competition law and regulation has been passed, like one that was passed in our country, in Kenya, by the Competitive Act of Kenya, that really affected especially the telecommunication companies. Could your change be coming because of new technologies? And with new technologies, they resort to increased product obsolescence. So where you're producing a product and within a very short time, a new technology comes and it renders all your products obsolete. Is a change coming because of a labor shift? Could be you're having more millennials in the workplace, you're having more Generation Z in your workplace. Maybe you're having baby boomers and you're having all these people working within the same organization. Or maybe there's a labor shift in terms of even the kind of workforce composition within the organization. How about business life cycles? Could they be that they have become shorter, especially because of technology? Social changes, what is happening in the social cultural environment, the norms, the values, globalization and trade liberalization. Increase in consumerism as more consumers become aware of their needs, aware of their rights. That should result to a lot of changes. As more people become aware of their rights, then it becomes more critical that as a change manager, as an organization, you have to be keen about that in terms of your labeling, in terms of your packaging, etc. Concern over social and environmental issues. We're talking about green markets. Are people being concerned about environment? We're talking about global warming. We're talking about changes in climate, and all these things have resulted to even organizations having to change in terms of their processes, their procedures, their structures, etc. Or is the change coming from an internal trigger where you're maybe modifying the strategy, or you have new equipment, or you have new processes, job restructuring? So in this case, I would wish you to just review from a change agent's perspective and try to find out what are the forces acting upon me, so that even as you're evaluating the change process, it is more clearer on what needs to be done. And now these are some of the challenges that we have in change management. And for each of these challenges, I would wish that you review them and try to ask yourself, what then are the mitigation strategies of these challenges? If I realize that the reason there is resistance to change is because many people cannot imagine the organization's place in the future, what is my role as a change manager? I need to ensure that I picture the vision for them so that they can be able to see the organization's place in the future. And that will make it easier for them to actually accept and support the change processes. As we saw in our earlier images, most people do not like the undesirable information that is required whenever you are changing. And yes, definitely, there'll be a lot of undesirable information. People may have to be laid off. There could be an issue to do with a change in terms of the processes. And people generally hate change. We realize that. They don't mind continuous improvement, but they don't like change. So the refusal to accept the importance of undesirable information. How do you package this information in such a way that the people who are supposed to actually act on the change will have the desire to participate in the change? You have to ensure that the people who are implementing the change have the desire. They have to see what is in for them. And sometimes, even though you're packaging information, say you want to lay off, maybe you're doing restructuring. Some organizations have actually decided, what if we decided to be retraining our employees on skills on entrepreneurship? Can we retrain them? Can we provide to them financial literacy skills? So that when it comes to restructuring, there's fear, we reduce on the fear on their end. That way, they will be more adaptable, more accepting of the changes. Another challenge to change management is where people cling to old ways of thinking. And we hear people always saying, this is how we do things over here, and people usually resist the change. How do you manage that? How do you ensure that you change people's perspective and mindset so that they are willing to adapt to new business context? Other challenges could be where there are differing assumptions and expectations by decision makers. The top management, sometimes they're not in agreement. One group of the people is for the change, another group is not for the change. And this can actually result to a lot of confusion within the organization. The other challenge to change management is communication barriers. And when we think about communication, we're thinking about the entire flow of communication, how the information is packaged, who delivers this information, what medium you use to communicate, and all these things actually have an effect on how people accept the change. Whom have you sent to be your ambassador in terms of change? Is that person a person whom people respect, or will there be communication barriers whenever this person speaks? Implementing in practical goals, where there is goals that are not clear, they're not structured, etc. So I would wish that you review more challenges. The list is not exhaustive. I would wish that you review what are the other challenges that you feel organizational managers face, whenever they are introducing a new change in an organization. Now, one of the changes that is very critical is resistance. Always resistance to change effort. People are always resisting change. And I'm going to be looking at this from 3 levels, where resistance comes from the individual, it could also come from the group, and it could also come from the organization. Why is this important? This is very important because whenever you realize that resistance is coming from an individual perspective, or that people maybe have a lack in terms of their skill set, maybe they have a negative attitude towards change, maybe they are resisting, they would want to preserve the status quo, then you can come up with a change model like ADKAR: awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement, that can actually help this individual so that they can be able to accept the change effort. However, most people actually argue that in an organization, people do not relate as individuals. People relate in a group. People want to have that group identity where they are guided by some norms and values and some socialization. And so we have what we call group thinking and group dynamics. And all these things come and they actually hinder the change processes. So what do you do as a change agent? You cannot bring individual tools to manage change at the group level. You have to break the group first. And this is where some change models like Kurt-Lewin becomes very critical. Very critical in the sense that you have to break those norms, you have to break those ties, you have to break those things that resort to people coming together and actually resisting change as a group. So you have to work on the group norms, you have to work on the socialization, you have to work on the culture, you have to break the groups. Once you've broken the groups, then you can be able to employ models like ADKAR, where you manage change at the individual level. But sometimes change is not just because of the people in the organization. Change could come because of the other subsystems within the organization. Some of the subsystems could be top-level management, the structures, the technology, the shared values, the style of management. All these things play a role in matters how change is managed. So the organizational aspects would include structure, resource availability, you have management support. And if you realize that resistance is coming from that level, then what you need to do, you need to come up with a multi-dimensional kind of change management technique. McKinsey 7S model, where you look at the 7 S's, the style, the strategy, the structure, the shared values, the staff. How do all these things interrelate? Because a change in one results to a change in another. Now, I would want to share with you the model of employees' decision to actively resist an organizational change effort. Did you ever know that whenever you resist change, that actually there's an emotional planning, it's actually rational. Even when you resist change within 5 minutes or even seconds or 2 minutes, that you've actually gone through the entire process of deciding to actively resist the organizational change effort. Now, when you look at this diagram, you can see the different boxes and what happens in each of these boxes that could all result to increase in resistance behavior. Now, when you look at how the discovery of new information, we just said in the challenges of organizational change that there's something that we call communication barrier. How do people in the organization get to know about the changes? Do they get to know about the changes through a grapevine? Do they get to know about the changes through an official memo? How do they get to know about the changes? Now, depending on some different attributional appraisal, the kind of environment, is it open? Is it closed? Is it an environment where people have a learning culture? Or is it an environment where people are they are against change? There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of anxiety. What kind of information do these people have regarding this change that you're bringing? Have they heard through the grapevine that they're going to be losing jobs? Have they heard that possibly their departments are being merged and so there is fear? Now, when fear comes, people get an emotional reaction. Sometimes it may not be necessarily fear. If your organization has positive vibes, probably it could be excitement. It could also depend on the kind of characteristic of the employees, the emotional characteristic that you have built over time through your organizational culture. Now, all this results to some level of emotional reaction. And this emotional reaction results to you thinking, do I resist the organizational change effort? And before somebody can make that decision, there are some assessments that are done. As person assesses the impact of resistance, efforts required to resist, and the risk involved. Now, impact of resistance. This is where the person, the employee, keeps on asking, what if I continue resisting? Are there consequences? Are there consequences associated with my actions? Now, if your consequences are not credible, if people don't feel like there will be any consequence for their action, then they can continue resisting change. Now, assessment of the effort required to resist. The